Hello and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb.
And I'm Christina. And together we bring family ideas about health, happiness, and successful children that are both inside.
And outside the box. If you like the show, be sure to follow Christina on Facebook.
And please leave us a like or review on your favorite podcast platform.
Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Matthew Brackett. Matthew is the 10th of 13 children from a small town in New England. With a rich 30-year voyage in personal, professional, and intercultural leadership development, Matthew is considered to be much more than an executive coach. Imagine him as a human Swiss Army knife, being the go-to consultant, coach, and confidant for high-performing influencers who want to balance personal and professional realms, leading better, loving better, and living better. A passionate promoter of the human essence, Matthew offers conferences and workshops regarding many areas of leading human beings in a healthy and wholesome manner, creating desired culture and embracing the beauty of diversity. Welcome, Matthew. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Christina and Herb. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This is my first podcast with two people, with two hosts. So this is great.
Yeah, actually, that throws people off a little bit. They're like, how do we talk to both of you? It's like, oh, no, we take turns. We know how to do this.
Right.
Being married for 30 years, we know how to give each other a little bit of space and cut in when we need to and all of that kind of stuff. And so we really encourage our guests to just go with the flow and make it happen.
Excellent. No, you have it figured out. And I think what brought us together is our love for the family.
Absolutely. Love of
And
the
all
family.
the work that you do at home, homeschooling. I know you have a different term for it, but education at home, the family. And this is, I know that in my bio comes across as a bit a more executive or corporate, but really the leadership work that I do is really in any sector. And in the family and relationships is something that's very close to my heart. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And so like what I call it is a holistic approach to leadership, how I lead myself. So I do a lot of individual work. I do couples work, so how we lead in intimate relationships, and then how we lead in the family context, and then how we lead professionally, and how we lead in organizational contexts. So there's a lot of underlying principles that are the same, but the dynamics change, the context change, and so sometimes the approach also changes.
So my mom was the third of 11 children. So she was up near the top. And so she had to take care of a lot of her younger siblings and stuff. And
That's
the
right.
younger siblings usually didn't get much of a leadership role. So you are 10th of 13th. So you are
At the
towards the
bottom.
end. You
That's
were one
right.
of the smallers. How is it that someone from the 10th of 13 children ended up becoming a leader consulting coach? How do you get there?
Right. It's a good point. Yes, the first kids in the family usually are the guinea pigs, right? And then they take over the parenting after a certain number of kids, right? So it is, and actually I have before the sister that's born after me, there was a 5-year gap. So I was the youngest for 5 years. And I was what my siblings called, I was the spoiled one. And I think I continue to be. They continue to see me as that. But anyway, so my story, I suppose it has a lot to do with my story. Is I went off to the unique part about my story is I went into ministry, into formal ministry as a Catholic priest for 20 years. So there's 10 years of education and training, 20 years of ministry, which brought me to a lot of different countries. And the work that I did, I was in a lot of leadership roles of running institutions, educational institutions, formation centers, seminaries, and then also doing a lot of, obviously, development of people that were preparing for ministry, developing and working with people that were in ministry, but also doing a lot of coaching, counseling, what we would call spiritual direction, and a personal accompaniment of professionals around their human and spiritual development. So I think, and then I was also a chaplain in the United States Navy. And I think being in positions and then being in strong hierarchical organizations, like would be a religious order, would be the Catholic Church, would be the Navy and Marine Corps. And now I do a lot of work with people in other corporate organizations or faith-based organizations. I think I became very, very familiar with power dynamics and hierarchy and navigating complex organizations. And also very familiar, it's not a mystery to us, around healthy and also unhealthy use of power and authority and influence in those contexts, whether it be faith-based contexts, whether it be in the military. They're just excellent examples of great leadership, and also of examples of dysfunctional and toxic leadership. So I think that's I'm well versed in it. I've seen it very close. I've experienced it. I was in leadership roles, and as I look back on my life, I thought, well, there's certain things that I definitely could have done better. But I also experienced good leadership relationships, and I experienced very poor relationship. And what I say is, when leadership, it will always will be part of the human experience. You know, authority, power, influence. It has been, it will be, it is part of the human experience, and it always will be. And when it's healthy, and when it's done in a very, what I would call, functional and healthy way, it's life-giving.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced that. When it is used in an unhealthy way or in a destructive manner, it can be very destructive. And when that happens in the environment of faith and family, the destruction can go much deeper because it touches the deeper fibers of the human person.
So in an organization, not always, but typically there is some sort of level of competence to rise to the ranks of leadership. Not always, but in general. But
Yeah.
in a family, it's like the leader is the parent, and that's just the way it is. And so whether they're good, whether they're bad, there's a whole lot different dynamic, because you don't rise to parent based on competence. Um, so I can understand how, yeah, within a family, learning leadership skills would actually be a very good thing, especially for people who are having their children at home, so that they can
course.
learn to be more effective and not put as much trauma on their children by using the power dynamic as like, I'm the dad, this is what I say, this is how it goes, but instead using leadership tools. So what are some leadership tools that you would start with to help people understand that within a family, that, hey, just because it's just not what dad says, but how to soften that and make that more relatable to the family dynamics and to the children?
Yes, I would preface it with a fascinating piece of data, which we don't often think about. And I would talk about this a lot with the Marines, is we have to prepare ourselves professionally for so many things. We get certificates, we get, licenses, we get degrees, in the professional world, there's all this preparation that's expected. But the two most important things that most human beings will do, there's no required training, and that's to be in a committed relationship and to be a parent. Now, if I were a politician, if I were in government, this piece of information would be very worrying for me, and I would want to do something about it, because it directly affects a country, a population on many levels. And if we look out the window at society, I think a lot of dysfunction begins in relationships and in parenting. And I'm not trying to throw the parents under the bus. But as a society, we're not expected to prepare for it. We're expected to know how to do it and just to figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, preparation. And then this is my first message for your audience is, all right, this is one of the most important things I'm going to do, and the most influential things that I'm going to do in my life. And I want to prepare better so that I can do this better. And that I'm referring to being in a relationship and parenting.
Yeah.
So that would be my first thing. And if you haven't done training, well, we kind of figure it out as you go. But this with the world in the digital world, there's so much information out there. So we really don't have whole lot of excuses to say, well, I don't know what to do or where to go. There's so many resources, and it's about just a little bit of intentionality around how can I be better in my relationships? How can I parent better? So when it comes to relationships, as far as committed relationships, and then this applies also to parenting, first and foremost, it's a little bit more self-awareness. Right? There's a lot, we all have blind spots. We're all in that same category together. But the less blind spots we have, the better for our romantic relationships, committed relationships, marriage, and the better for our children. So really creating self-awareness. And as you know, the coaching relationship, or whether it be counseling or whether it be some sort of other type of a personal accompaniment, that in and of itself enhances self-awareness, because we're forced to to look at ourselves in the mirror, or look at ourselves through the eyes of another in a confidential, safe setting, And then when, as human beings, when we transform experiences, thoughts, and emotions, when we transform them into language, they become more real to us. We take more ownership. We take more ownership of our strengths. We take more ownership of our challenges. But as human beings, it's easier not to do that. Okay, it's easier to live in kind of the darkness and sort of fumble our way through life.
Mhm.
But it's a huge responsibility, because if other people have to suffer the consequences of our fumbling through the darkness, and we don't really have to be in darkness, well, we can probably do a little bit better.
So
So
I really like some of the stuff you said. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
my personal belief is like the family is the core of the United States.
Yes.
And for the last couple of decades, the family has been under attack in multiple different ways. So like within several communities, the single motherhood rate has like skyrocketed. And even it's moving even stronger into the white population. So it was down to around 6% in the 60s, and we're up to 25% single motherhood now. And so the destruction of the family, it is hurting the United States. It's hurting every culture where the family is under attack. And so, you
Yes.
know, the weird outside of the box political stuff is like that's sort of intentional, some of the stuff that's going on. So I love that you brought that back to strong families and leadership and how important that is in the family. Because if the family structure is secure, then it makes the community more secure, and then it makes the broader community and then the nation secure, because you have something to work for. So I love that you said that. So
Look,
thank you.
there's so many layers to it. If everything,
Yeah.
and I'm not an expert in the area, but I think, mental health would be a lot better.
Mhm.
And then we see the consequences of the challenges of mental health. There'd be more stability, more security. There'd be much less dangers, right? And Herb, you and I, as men, we have to say, men, we have to do better. And this is, I don't mean to go on a tangent, and I want to open up some space for Christina to say something, but I just feel very bad when there's so much stuff around women, how women have to protect themselves, how they live in fear of so many things, and it's on us. We've created that fear, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, and all that other stuff. And then I think men can do better. We can do better in that relationship. Now, I'm not just putting all. I think women can also do better.
We can absolutely do better.
And the feminist movement, which it had to happen in so many ways, but at the same time, it put all these pressures on women, and then it demanded, sort of had all these expectations, and women had this freedom, and then men sort of lost their identity and their place. And I think we lost a lot of confidence in who we are as men. And so now we just walk away and don't take ownership. But anyway, that's sort of a tangent. But these are all the things, these all comes back to family and to the importance of solid families.
Yeah.
Christina, I interrupted you.
Oh no, you're totally fine. And part of it is that leadership that you were talking about, how we need to make sure that as leaders, we're looking at ourselves, each of us individually, men, women, whatever, family, mother, dad, looking at ourselves and really saying, what is something that I can do a little bit better, and getting the help to do it, right? That's
Yes.
exactly what we're talking about here, is that all of us, if we're striving to be the best we can be for not only ourselves, but for our family, for our children, then what a beautiful world we can create, because everyone's striving to get just that little bit better and not being blindsided, like you said, not having those blind spots.
Yes. We'll always have them, but yes, if we can just intentionally be a little better,
Yep.
then it's gonna make everyone better around us, and it makes the environment better.
Yeah. So that started that conversation. Boy, we could go like way deep in that, but that would be a topic outside of this, and I would love to talk to you about that later, more in depth, because I have some differing viewpoints on that. Oh, some similar, but some different, because again, I'm outside the box.
Right.
But part of the reason that we started Vibrant Family Education is because the school system itself is starting to interfere in families,
Right.
and especially entrepreneur families, because the entrepreneurs also in the United States are another backbone of our country. They're the innovators. They're the next generation of business leaders. And in schools right now, a lot of what's happening is they're teaching these weird concepts like money is bad and these power dynamics are corrupt. And so entrepreneur kids are going to school, and then they're learning that their parents are bad because they're the bad capitalists out there trying to make money. And so part of what we do is we want to bring the strong families back and have the family values brought back. And so for the people who are doing it right, and for the strong men who do have families and are leading their families, we want to help them keep their kids and pass those values on instead of necessarily being corrupted in the school system.
Yes. No, it's so good. I'm all for any way I can support your work, the work that you do. And again, but I didn't mean to do some man bashing. I think there's so many
Oh,
great
no.
dads out there. And I think there's been a change in parenting as well. If we look at the
Good.
way dads, the presence of dads are much more present in the lives of their kids, right? They're much more proactive. They're there. And there's a lot of positives to be said about that.
Well, one of the things that we, Vibrant Family Education really looks at is the whole child and the whole family, right? Is what is the role of the mom, the dad, back and forth. But then how does that's really blended lately, because now we have stay-at-home dads as well as stay-at-home moms. It's not just a mom role anymore. And so just like we were saying, building that and making sure that you're doing it from a place of love and a place of strength as well, because there has to be some strength there to look at your blind spots and things that might be going really well and things that might not be going very well. And then being vulnerable enough to ask for help if you need it, or ask for leadership coaching, etc., to make sure that this continues to evolve and be better for everyone.
Yeah. So where do you start with leadership coaching?
Yeah.
So a dad comes to you, doesn't necessarily getting along with his kids.
Or the wife.
The man bashing has been happening and he feels less than. So he's trying to step back and he's not necessarily leading his family, and his family's struggling. So in order for that struggling family to not struggle, the man has to stop struggling and has to take a leadership role. So how do you start with that? Where do you begin to bring that back?
Well, there's a few things. First, when I work with couples, so generally the couple would come looking for support. And there might be the blaming game, but I only work with couples that want to make their relationship, their marriage work, right?
Good.
And that are interested in working on themselves. If you come to me and say, I want to change my spouse, well, then I'm not the right person. Whether that means that I want to change them, who they are, or I want to change them for someone else, I'm not the right person. Right? So if you have to be willing to work on yourself, because I want, as a couple, I use some very sophisticated assessments that are very helpful, that sort of give us a roadmap in the journey. And so what it does is it helps the individuals, the man and the woman, to see themselves better, to understand themselves better, and to see the other better. And therefore, just by seeing them better, then I can hear them better and I can love them better. Because oftentimes a lot of things just get confused and missed in translation and how we interpret things, and things escalate. And so it's really bringing that back down to basics of how you're wired as human beings, right? And then how you're wired, what does that mean around how you communicate, how you interpret things, how you love, how you deal with conflict, how you deal with challenges, right? So it's a very scientific based assessment, which is helpful because it gives people a lot of, all right, not only that, but they relate to it. They're like, holy smokes, this is when they see, they know a lot about themselves and about their spouse, but when they see it written down, or they hear me say, they say, oh, that's me. And then, oh, that's my spouse. That's exactly. And then they begin to understand, well, that's the way they are. And then they begin to fall in love again with their essence. And I just think that's really important. And when that happens, that automatically changes their dynamic, but then the dynamics in the home. And I want to go back to one other thing, which this is very basic, but oftentimes we skip the basics. Is as a couple, but also in family, in leadership, whether we're leading in the home or in a professional space, as human beings, we all want to feel that we are seen, that we are understood, that we are listened to, that we are appreciated, and that we're valued. And if we can do that with our spouse, you've made huge advances. If we can do that with our children, if we can do that with the people we lead in the organization, then with half the battle's already won. We don't need to learn any sort of very sophisticated leadership skills. That's where it starts. And as human beings, when we can see others, listen to them, that they feel understood, valued, and appreciated. Now, in the homes, sadly, well, it's not sadly, this is a natural thing that happens in the home. We let our guard down. In the professional space, we're often a bit more attentive. We kind of turn on a switch because we have to be on. We get home, but because we're home, we want to sort of, let down our guard and just kind of feel like we're more at home, more comfortable, not be watching our P's and Q's. But what might naturally happen is that we then become very careless.
Yes.
In the way we care about each other. And so I just think we can be more careful and intentional about doing this at the home, and not because we have to, but because we love the people
Yes.
who make up my home.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that. And I love how you were also saying that you use specific like assessments and stuff to kind of give you that springboard or that place to kind of talk from. In the classroom or even in learning styles, we talk about and we teach our families about the different learning styles of the child. Well, guess what? That gives them that base of, oh, now I understand how they understand that concept, but not this concept because it doesn't match up with their learning style. Or I understand why they're struggling with this area of learning whenever the other part of area just came really easy to them. And so assessments aren't to put you in a box, but instead is to give you that stepping stool to move forward out of the box and be supportive.
Of course, yes. And just to understand, it sheds light. By no means are they categories or like absolute categories or boxes that, oh, this is me, nothing I can do about it. But it can give us valuable information about how we're wired or how we're made. And then that's our springboard where we take off from.
You talked about when come home, you let your guard down. I think there's more to it than that, because it's like there's also learned behaviors and habits. So when your kids are young, they don't communicate real well. So you're used to making them do things. And so as they grow up, these are your habits. So you just make your kids do stuff because when they were 2, 3, 4, you had to do that. But then as they grow up, you have that habit and you're not listening to them, and you don't grow with them, and they don't they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, because you're just telling them what to do because that's what you've always done.
Right.
So that letting your guard down and not continuing to grow with your children is right in there as well.
And you're so right that it's much more than just letting your guard down. It's as you know, to every age, there's a different style of parenting. And that's the wisdom of leadership. When I talk about leadership, it's what I call the leadership triangle: the leader, the followers, and the context. Right? And the amazing thing is that, first of all, happens within inside of me. Okay? I am my own leader and I am my own follower. In other words, the person that I want to be, my values, my ideals, my goals, it's the person, my ideal self, as they would say in psychology, and then my actual self, who I am today. So there's that leadership process that happens within us in the context that I'm a human being. In my case, I'm a male. And if I was married, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm a professional. So this is my context. And the wisdom of a leader is to know how to lead in a specific context and with the specific type of followers. So we bring that into the home. We have this context, right? And how do I adapt to the context of my child? And now that if I have a few children, well, each child is a different channel, different wavelength. And that's the amazing thing, even though they come from the same parents, right? And then every age, the parenting style has to change. Just like leadership styles have to change according to what level of leadership I'm at or where my followers are at. And that's the wisdom. So there's a bit more complexity to it, as we know, but when we love the people that we parent or the people that we lead, well, we'll do that because we want to lead them better.
Yes.
And so, as you said, and really, this is to your point, Herb, is as children grow, well, the style of parenting has to change. And sometimes we don't think about that. And so parents get stuck in one style of parenting, which they might apply across years, and that's not the most effective.
one of the things I do when I work with families is I work with them about what are their core family values. And they're like, oh, but there's just so many. And I remind them that core values, they don't necessarily change, but they kind of morph and become more important or a little bit less important as your children grow as well. So when they're little, you really want to instill the integrity, the hard work, the perseverance, all of that kind of stuff. But then later, as they get more skills, you want to make sure you're instilling that self-confidence and self-motivation and things like that. So it's a shift as they grow. So the
Right.
main values are still there, but it shifts and morphs with the ages.
Of course. Well, they're sponges at the beginning, and so that repetition, what they see, what they hear,
Yep.
and that repetition is that's so we want them to be seeing and hearing, and that repeating this, what we most want them to see and hear. And then as you said, then there's sort of even the professional space, same thing, is that empowerment. As people grow, we want to empower them to make their decisions and to grow in confidence, to discover their identity of what makes them different, who they are, and then to even to make mistakes, and we're there as parents to help them learn from those mistakes, and to walk with them.
That just sparked something in me. It's like, okay, so as a leader, you're helping your children grow, you're helping your coworkers grow, etc. How much do you help them to not make those mistakes? I mean, what do you kind of tell people, like, oh, you totally let them fall? Well, you have to fail and fall and get up and go again. So give us a little bit of insight what you would kind of talk about that.
Well, there's always risk. I talk about measured risks.
Okay.
Right? Or allowing people to make measured mistakes, right, at a lower cost level.
Yeah.
And that's what it means with your kids. Now, as parents, you love your kids so much, you don't want them to make mistakes. You don't want them to get hurt.
Right.
So everything, I think, just measuring the risk, there's a mitigating the risk, but there's always going to be a little bit. We can't take that away. If we take that away, then we're not allowing our children to grow. Or we're not really, you're not preparing them for life. So I guess mitigating the risk, knowing that there's always a little bit of risk, getting a little bit of hurt, no problem. Learning to ride a bike. I remember my siblings, we're kind of old school. My mother would just, if we had a pool, my mother would just, as a baby, would throw me into the pool. And then one of my siblings would, after a few seconds of being underwater, they just grab me and pull me out. And that was how we learned to swim, right? By experiencing drowning, right? But just a little bit mitigated risk, right? Then they would put me on a bike, and they would, and then they would just push me until I fell down. Okay, then they'd pick me up again. But it was all measured and cared for risk, and that's what I think that's the wisdom of knowing how to do it. Because then, as they become adolescents and a little bit older, mistakes might be a little bit more serious. The consequences might be a little bit more serious, but you've trained them, you've educated, and you're always with them, so that then when they feel that there's trust, they can come back to you and talk about their mistakes rather than having to hide them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was one of those things we always told our boys is like, if you make a mistake, it's better to come talk to us and let us know than letting us find out later, because we'd rather hear everything up front, come talk to us about it, instead of, finding out later and it being so much worse or so much bigger than what it could have been.
I think it's important, as you mentioned about values, the family, what I would call like a family project, family plan, just like a business would make a plan.
Yeah.
I think if we're a bit more intentional about how we run our families, then we'd also do a lot better. We sort of, you're very intentional about business, and most people spend more time at work than they would with their family. But if we had that same intentionality, I think families would also be better around intentionally around our relationship as a couple, and also how we raise our kids. And so it's sort of, when I talk about communication with leaders, and the same applies to family, right? Who are we? What do we do? Why do we do what we do? And how do we do what we do?
Yeah.
And that's a very simplified structure, but and how means, well, what are our values? What are the principles that guide our behaviors? And then that also automatically creates accountability mechanisms, right? These are our values and behaviors that are expected, right? And then as parents, you say, well, these are my expectations, and these are the consequences when those expectations aren't met. So then there's a lot of clarity. No one's going to feel like they're like something caught them off guard. There's a lot of clarity. There's a lot of education that's happening in the process. And then there's a lot of clarity around where we're going.
Mhm.
And so families don't do that. And I don't, there's no ill intent in not doing it. It's
Right.
just, I think even, coming up with a model to do that or a workshop to do that would be so beneficial for so many couples, right? How do we make a family project and plan?
Mhm. Yeah, actually, it should be part of that pre-marriage thing is like, let's look at this and see what we want the rest of our married life to look like. Let's see if we can get some of this down pat before we jump and make that final commitment. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things that we talk to entrepreneurs and business people about is like,
Yeah.
you're always doing business development, you're always doing business planning, you're always doing self-development, you're always learning there. And you're doing all of this for your family because people go into entrepreneurship to make a better life for their family because they see something wrong and they want to grow something different, right? But then they lose their family along the way. So we position ourselves as, hey, let's do the family development part. Let's put your family in there so that way you don't have to wait till the end to bring your family together. You're doing your personal development, you're doing your business development, and you're doing your family development.
All together.
So that three legs of the stool, so the most important things are all growing at the same rate. Because so many entrepreneurs end up losing their families because they spend so much time away that they lose track of the important things. And the important thing is the family, is the children, because the children are the future. The children are what's the most important. And your jobs may come and go, your businesses may come and go, but they will always be your children. And so we try and put the importance of the children back into the family and planning of all of that.
Such great work. Thank you for all that you do. And we got to get this word out more to more people so that they can have access to all the services that you offer.
Yeah, exactly. And people you, I mean, building that leadership, making sure they understand themselves and how to lead and be with other people.
Yes. Yeah, because if they're doing it wrong, and again, parents, they do the best they can.
They do.
And they do what their parents taught, or they do what their parents did, because like you said, the first 5 to 6 years, they're just sponges.
Or they did the opposite because they're like, oh no, I don't want to do that again.
Right. There is a bit of that, but again, they're sponges. So it's like, even if they don't want to do it, a lot of times they will find that it's like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. That was just like my dad used to be. Or there was times where I could suddenly feel my face looking like my dad when something happened. It's like, oh my God, that's what my dad looked like. That's why my dad made that face. And so, being able to understand that and grow through that and make those changes subtle, just this small, is so very important.
It is. So when you go back to what you asked me, Herb, is, when people come to work with me, a lot of it starts with, first of all, just creating stuff around how I lead myself. Now, in a lot of the professional work that I do is people that come to me because of their positions in an organization,
right? Around how
they begin, but then automatically they begin to apply those principles to their personal life. And even I ask them, okay, how can this little strategy that we're talking about, how can you apply that in your marriage? How can you apply that at home? Because that's a great place to practice these skill set.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your spouse would appreciate it. So that's
that too.
And so that it really just, it just naturally happens. Now, are there assessments that we can use? Yes, I use the Energy Leadership Index, which is it's personal assessment just around how I show up energetically, sort of a snapshot of where I'm at in life right now and what are my stressors. And people get a lot out of that. It's all these scientifically based, data-based assessments that help brings information to the surface. And then it makes the process, in my view, it accelerates the process and makes it more effective. Same thing with couples. Like, as people, if you just go to therapy and start talking, well, you could be there for 2 or 3 years just talking and without necessarily, all right, where are we trying to go with this? Correct. And as we know in coaching, it's very geared towards, all right, sure, there's things to resolve, but also where do we want to go? And what can I do better to get there? And one thing I like to include in this conversation, and with this, maybe we can start drawing this to a conclusion, is the types of power. Now, there's a lot here, but we won't go into all of it. But there's generally there's 7 types of power that just in the human experience, especially in professional space. But I started thinking about this in sort of types of power that happen in the home, right? And the first type of power is pride, right? And it's a negative type of power. And I mean pride in a negative way, not family pride, but of pride and arrogance that sort of a selfishness that blinds us.
I'm the dad. I know what to do. You have to do what I say because
Right.
I'm the dad.
Right. And so that can be, I'm going to go sort of from the more negative to the more positive. So we can have power. We can have punishment, which has its place. But coercion and punishment can also be taken out of context and be abused of, right? So it always has its place. We have another power, which is information. The information that I have about my kids, I can use that in a life-giving way, but I can also use it against them. Of my spouse, I can use it in a life-giving way and to help me love them better, or I can use it against them. Maybe spouses that tend to sort of take mental lists of offenses and mistakes or whatever. So there's information, the power of the information that I have about other people. Then the power of words. Right. Then the power of the ability to listen. That's a power that happens in the family. And then we have the power of interests. How interested am I in my spouse and in my children? I think it's a great power that we can use for good. Then there's the power of change, that I want to be different. And when I want to be different, this will affect my family, this will affect my spouse. There's the power of example. And there's the power in the intimate relationship, in the marriage, there's the power of sex. Sex is a huge power that can be so used for so much good and bonding and intimacy and growth. And from that powerful sexual power, just in the gender, but then also in sexual intimacy, well, that's where children come from. That's the power. It's so life-giving. In this context of talking about power, I'm using power as power is given to us for good.
Yeah.
Right. But as we know, we can use it to hurt or to harm, or we can use it really to help or to grow. And then the last power that I would list is the power of love. So I know I ran through those very quickly, but it make people think about, all right, well, I have all of these powers at my fingertips. How am I using them for good and for growth?
Great way to look at it.
I love that. That is a great way to kind of wrap this up. Is like, how are you using your power? Are you using it to encourage your family and grow your family and your community? Absolutely. Love it.
And there's so many of them that you wouldn't necessarily think of as power that you have. But you would think of it as, my personality has me doing this. It's like, but you can change that. You can use that differently. It doesn't have to be who you are. It can become what you do and who you are at the same time. And you can make choices and change the way you use that. That's whoo.
You just gave him something to think about for the rest of the day.
You gave me something.
Probably more than a day.
The power of choice. That's another one. I'll add that to my list. But it's a different perspective. I think it can be helpful to look at it through this lens.
Yeah, and a change of perspective, like they say, is a miracle. So, miracles happen. So that was really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. And thank you, Christina.
You're very welcome.
Me on your show.
Well, audience, this has been a powerful conversation. I'm sorry. This is just one that, even though I don't know, we were having a low, kind of serious kind of tone, but there's so much that I hope you got out of this conversation. The gold nuggets that we tried to drop along the way and pick up and use. And make sure you don't just listen to it once. Go back and listen again and find some other gold nuggets and then put them in place. Don't just put them away in your box in the back of your head. Put them in place and reach out to people who can help you if you are stuck and needing a little bit of guidance along the way. So Matthew, as we're wrapping up, we want to make sure the audience gets to know, how do they get a hold of you if they want to explore more leadership and learning and coaching with you?
Yeah, so my website is bracketalliance.com because I like to make alliances with people. And Matthew Brackett on LinkedIn, Matthew Brackett on Instagram, Matthew Brackett on Facebook, and a YouTube channel also under that same name.
Okay. And everything, of course, will be in the show notes. So it'll be easy to just go down and click on it instead of having to remember it, but it's all right here for you as well.
And before we close, is there anything that we didn't talk about, that we didn't cover, that you would like to present to our audience, that you was like, oh man, this would have been really good to cover today?
No, I think we gave them enough today.
Oh,
I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Let's, as I say, let's continue to lead better,
Yes.
to love better, and to live better.
Love it.
love it.
Great
Absolutely love it.
And that will most likely be your quote on the social media, on the promo. I love it. Thank you, Matthew, so much for
Be the
joining
title
us
of our
today.
title of our podcast.
Ooh, there we go. That's even better yet.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're very welcome.
And you know, with so many problems in the world and so many people not doing anything, that you are stepping up and stepping forward and using your skills to help other people and to make the world a better place. I would like to thank you for doing what you do. I would like to thank you for putting yourself out there, because so many people are too afraid to do that, and for using your power and your love to influence the world. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Herb.
You're very welcome. All right, audience, until next time, stay well, stay safe, and help your family be happy, healthy, and successful. Bye for now.